Okay, so there's a new executive order on the table, and it's poised to really shake up who qualifies for public service loan forgiveness. We're going to break down exactly what this order says, why it's happening, and what it all means, pulling everything directly from the text of the order itself. But first things first, to really get what's changing, we have to understand the program it's changing. Public service loan forgiveness, you probably know it as PSLF, had a really simple deal for people in public service. Think teachers, government workers, folks at nonprofits. The idea was you work for 10 years, you make your loan payments for 10 years, and then poof, the government forgives whatever is left of your federal student debt. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll quickly recap that original PSLF deal. Then, we're going to dive right into the order's stated purpose, why they say this is necessary. From there, we'll see how it redefines public service, which is key. We'll look at 5 very specific exclusions it creates, and then wrap it all up by nailing down the core policy change at the heart of this whole thing. So let's just rewind for a second. What was that original premise? Well, back in 2007, the program was set up to be a pretty straightforward incentive. The goal was to encourage new graduates to go into public service careers, and, just as importantly, to stay in them. It was a simple 3-step path to forgiveness. Step 1, you had to work in the right kind of job, for a government agency or a 501c3 nonprofit. Step 2, you make 120 qualifying payments, which of course adds up to 10 years. And finally, step 3, once you hit that 10-year mark, your remaining federal loan balance gets wiped clean. Simple as that. Now we get to the heart of it all, the executive order itself. Section 1 is where the administration lays out its official reasoning. It identifies what it calls abuses and perverse incentives that it sees in the current PSLF system. So the order points to 2 main issues. On one side, it talks about program abuse, claiming that a waiver process was used to pay off loans for people who hadn't actually met the 10-year requirement. And on the other side, it talks about perverse incentives, arguing that the program itself might actually be helping to drive up tuition costs and encouraging students to take on huge amounts of debt they can't sustain. This quote, pulled directly from the order's text, really frames the core argument. It claims that taxpayer money, through this loan forgiveness program, is ending up subsidizing employees at organizations whose work is seen as going against the public interest and even national security. And that brings us to the stated policy goal. The last paragraph of Section 1 makes it crystal clear. The new policy is that people who work for organizations that have a substantial illegal purpose should not get their loans forgiven through PSLF. This really sets the stage for the big change to come. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, the main directive, the real action item, is in Section 2. It tells the Secretary of Education to come up with new rules that literally change the definition of public service for this entire program. So here's the crucial point. The order isn't trying to change the 10 years of payments or the 10 years of service. No, the change is all about the employer. If your workplace is no longer considered a public service organization under this new definition, then you would no longer be on that path to getting your loans forgiven. And this is where the order gets very, very specific. It doesn't just say redefine it. It lays out 5 specific categories of activities, and if an organization is involved in these activities, its employees would become ineligible for PSLF. So here are the 5 big categories right from Section 2. We're talking about organizations involved in certain immigration law violations, supporting terrorism or political violence, specific acts of child abuse, patterns of illegal discrimination, and even patterns of violating certain state laws. Let's zoom in on a few of these to see the details. First up, immigration. The text is very precise here. It targets organizations that are aiding or abetting violations of 8 U.S.C. 1325 or other federal immigration laws. And just so you know, that specific statute, 1325, is about improper entry into the U.S. The second exclusion is kind of a two-parter. On one hand, it's about supporting designated foreign terrorist organizations and cartels, but then it adds this broader category: engaging in violence for the purpose of obstructing or trying to influence federal policy. The third exclusion deals with child abuse, and again, the order uses very specific language. It lists the chemical and surgical castration or mutilation of children, and it also specifies the trafficking of children to so-called transgender sanctuary states for purposes of emancipation from their lawful parents. Now, the fifth exclusion shifts gears and looks at state laws. It targets organizations with a pattern of violating state tort laws.
And tort laws are essentially just civil laws about wrongful acts that cause harm. The order even gives specific examples like trespassing, creating a public nuisance, vandalism, and blocking highways.
Okay, we've been deep in the details, so let's zoom out. What's the fundamental change here? What is the single biggest takeaway from what this executive order is trying to do to the PSLF program?
This table really says it all. Before this order, eligibility was pretty straightforward. It was all based on your employer's type. Are they a government agency? Are they a 501c3 nonprofit? Check the box. But after this order is implemented, the focus shifts completely to the employer's activities. Eligibility gets way narrower because it'll depend on what an organization actually does.
So if there's one thing you remember from this whole explainer, it's this. The system is moving from a simple question of status, what is the organization, to a much more complicated question of conduct, what does the organization do? And here's a fascinating little detail. This entire massive policy directive, all 5 of those exclusions and the whole new definition of public service, it's all packed into just one single section of the order, Section 2. The rest is just setting the stage. And that brings us to our final thought. The order kicks off a formal rulemaking process, so this isn't final yet, but it leaves us with a really critical question to chew on. As this new definition of public service starts to take shape, what kind of long-term ripple effects could it have on the careers that students choose and on the day-to-day operations of nonprofits all across the country?